Anything from last week we want to get on? It's gonna be tough to drag this out for 90 minutes, don't you think?
Hello and welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast from independent validator teams. Still defiantly is an independent podcast. That part is always going to happen, I suppose. Who's going to buy this? But
Exactly.
hey, we can but hope. We can but hope.
Is it one of those things where we could claim that we're violently independent because you don't say the other part?
I was going to say which parts are going to disappear first. I reckon the independent part is the bit that survives the longest.
I think so.
Because
I think that one's
how
fair.
can you sell out when you have nothing to sell?
What the hell?
The validator part, perhaps less so. But so I've got a point. So we've obviously got usual stacked features, news, whatnot, unstacked in terms of panel on account of some kind of real life admin. Well, Nullo's on holiday, just cruising around the South Pacific, and Schultz is doing life admin. So I keep forgetting that
just the diehards.
It's just the diehards. Well, but also because it's like late in the evening here. You just like there's only one other thing you'd be doing if you have a small child at this time of day.
Drinking.
Okay, maybe drinking or playing PlayStation. But probably sleeping, right? So you're just like, well, what? Who's doing life admin at like 10 o'clock at night? And you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's like mid-afternoon, right? So, so we were talking the other day. So here's something I think with the news items, whatever. We were talking the other day about which chain was it that was beefing with somebody about fudding? Do you remember
that? Yes, that was a. You mean the one that came up in a private Discord channel about fudding?
Yeah, so we don't have to name the specifics of it, but then what happened? So there was somebody who got called up by a foundation for fudding, which whatever the fuck, like back to the like, why are we here? Like, isn't the whole purpose of this, censorship resistance and blah blah blah? And you're somebody in your validator set says something. Actually, in that case, ironically, the validator in question wasn't even the correct validator. But anyway,
and it wasn't even that fudding, right? It was just criticism.
They were just saying an actual piece of technical criticism that would lead to a better outcome for everybody involved. But fudding, whatever, So so apparently, what we're doing here is, foundations or whatever in this case are going, it's valid technical criticism. Instead, we're going to call it fudding, which, by the way, fudding is completely legit anyway. But we're not going to do that. Fuck freedom of speech. Fuck professional integrity. Whatever. Anyway, that's not the point. The point was there was an interesting discussion after that about what exactly it's a kind of discussion we've been having on this podcast for a while, which is like what it's kind of always back to like what are the validators bringing to the table discussion, right? Because there was a question essentially like, okay, so if you're a validator and you're doing these different things for a chain, right? And in this particular case, there was obviously like you've been fudding, and there was a threat implicit in that. Like, and if there's one area in which this space still is zero trust or low trust, it is any idea that any counterparty of yours that would in other circles be a business contract has any kind of loyalty to you as an operator and your business as a node operator is that's the one thing that is definitely not the case, even if all the other social contracts and assumptions of whatever are still in place. But we had this long discussion like about or maybe not that long, but a discussion about what exactly it is that differentiates validators. And I think it was Polkachu was sort of saying, well, there was a point in the past where the volume of validators was so high and the quality was so low that technical competence was the line, right? That was what you were bringing to the table.
It was a barrier to entry that did separate solid validator. Well, solid node operators from ones who were
And that was the case even in Cosmos, which is actually, in terms of validators, relatively simple to run.
agreed, except for
If
that whole double sign thing, which is a good gotcha.
Yeah, that's good. Got you. I have to say, actually, I've set up like this ETH node recently, and I've got to say, like, actually, like the ETH stuff is relatively straightforward. I've also inherited an ETH node that I tried very, very hard to not inherit. It's actually a fork of Ethereum rather than an
Yeah.
ETH node, but is one of those where you really don't want to be the last one standing when the
Right.
music stops, and you just keep saying, "Oh," like somebody sending you emails or questions, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like this. Here's a link to the documentation," and
Is
then
it a validator or is this an RPC node?
it's a validator.
Oh, okay. All right. So there's a little bit more to it then. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like from walking around the code that is running. It's basically a Docker container that seems to be periodically restarting on a really old Ubuntu box.
Uh-huh.
On physical machines somewhere. You have to be on a specific network to access them. But anyway, I crawled around the box and like read a bunch of configuration files, and like from that worked back to what it probably was, which is a fork of. It's definitely a fork of Ethereum.
Yeah.
It's I think a fork of post-merge Ethereum.
Okay.
But it appears to like it's still. See, I'm not fully au fait with the whole. Because Ethereum is like proof of stake, but the proof of work thing is still happening, right? Because although we've done the merge, there's still voting power on proof of work, right?
I have no idea. Is there?
I
There's
think
not,
so.
is there? No.
Well, there's something weird with this. So there's something weird with this code base that I'm not fully convinced it is proof of stake. It's fucking slow though. It is really, really slow. But I think that's more about the quality of hardware that nodes run. Anyway, I digress.
So back to Polkachu's thing.
Back to Polkachu's thing. The Cosmos is quite easy to run, was my point. That could have been a reason, but I've laid out all my reasoning, and compared to Aptos and stuff, whatever. Anyway, so Cosmos is quite easy to run, but even so, barrier to entry was been to run these things well. And we've talked on the podcast about this before, that we theorized a couple of years ago that validators would become fungible over time, right? They become a commodity, and then you have to differentiate yourself. And this is something that Schultze's big relayer operator. You guys run a lot of RPCs, relayers as well. Obviously, Nullo does that too, and like Polkachu's all the backups, things like that. And we're kind of now in a point where is that enough? Is my question, I suppose. Like how fungible are validators now? Oh, because it felt like the conclusion of this conversation that we sort of had with Polkachu and a couple of other people was that the feeling was that we're passing a new like a new watershed or something, where there's some additional expectation on what validators bring to a project to even be validated, or to be validators that are in any way likely to be blessed enough by a foundation that they will actually make profit, right?
Well, I think it changes a lot across different chains we've seen. So some projects, in a Cosmos-based proof of stake type of network where you might have 60 or 100 validators and those slots are limited. And as a chain becomes higher in terms of just total value locked, and as the validator is responsible for a significant amount of value that could be slashed, I do think that that there still is a barrier to that, right? And I think that for larger delegations, there needs to be a set of criteria that I think those teams kind of look out for and things like that. What we have seen, what I saw in the past, but I think I commented back when we were talking about this, was like last year, the year before, you would start to see a lot of chains run validators on other chains. So they would do token swaps or some shit like that. And so like Chihuahua had a bunch of validators on different types of things that were taking slots from other node operators. And Stargaze runs an Osmosis one. They run a couple others, I think, as well. So like that started happening a little bit, which is actually, whatever. Like, I think I was joking then that we're going to have, Cosmos is going to be, it's a million chains, or say it's 100 chains, and then those 100 chains will be validated by the other 99 chains, right? Because they all have done token swaps and things like that to be able to run it. Yeah, totally. Now what we're seeing on some chains, which is totally different, is there are a tremendous amount of service organizations that provide value. Could be analytics, it could be security audits, it could be security reviews, it could be other types of things that they're selling a product. Like we're selling a service, right? We're selling expertise or we're selling some sort of product. And instead of selling that in USD, they stand up validators and they get large delegations from the team, because the team doesn't have to actually have them be a vendor, and they're actually not on the books, right? There's no, I mean, I don't even know. There's no like they're not.
There's no
So
agreement. Yeah.
there's no. Well, there could be an agreement. There could be an
Well,
agreement for it.
sure, there might be an agreement or a memo saying we're going to stake some stuff to you, but it will be, you know, from some entity in the Cayman Islands or whatever. So
Right.
it may as well be written on Moondust.
It's
and
not in the. It's not in the. It's not in the
tiered.
P and L. Right. There's
Yeah.
nothing on the P and L. So it's like if they stake to me or you or them, that's just commission that's coming off the top. All they have is the inbound, which is just the rewards coming from that, right? The other 95% of if it's a 5%. And so we're seeing that happen a lot. Like you see a lot of security audit teams running validators. You see a lot of analytics teams running validators, and that is because that turns into a profitable type of thing where they might be able to charge higher for amounts because they're not on the P&L, and those are rewards going out the door anyway. Because typically most of these things have this
you know
stake.
what, I guess especially for a security audit, like, okay, you know, there's a few gotchas here, right? Which is that number one, you have to be a chain that is going to make money for a validator with a significant enough delegation. That's not a given. That's only a handful of Cosmos chains. That's probably under 10 Cosmos chains, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, other networks exist, and it's still profitable to validate those. But like I kind of vaguely remember looking. We did a little bit of looking into auditing for HAL back in the day. You may recall. And the quotes on auditing for that were, you know, anywhere between $50,000 and $250,000.
Yeah.
So
for a review, right?
What's that? Sorry.
For for an actual audit. So say whatever that is. How long is that? How long do those things take? It's like a 5-week process or something. Like, are they actually going that deep, or is it like somebody looks at it for an afternoon?
They go through it line by line, and they give you a pedantic assessment of how bad your Rust code is.
Do they offer solutions? Or do they just point at problems?
They do. I think for certain types of solution, so certain types of problems where they know the solution, they offer the solution. But other than that, they give you. I think they quite often give you a general area of like improvement rather than.
Do they insure those at all? Do you know?
Do they
insure those? Like if they make a change and they provide you code to fix that change, and there's an exploit that's tied to that, are they at all liable in any sort of way?
My understanding is they're not that specific. Like they don't do anything that would put their business.
Like, don't do this.
My understanding is they don't do anything that puts their business at risk. They just make general area suggestions like, this is a known exploit, or this is exploitable, or this has these problems. But I mean, again, if you're working in something like Rust, like your attack surface is lower because those sorts of things, like the very obvious program error is quite often caught by the compiler. And then if you're working in a VM, like the VM will catch it, or the bug will be in the VM. And actually that's your biggest risk, is probably that there's some non-determinism at the VM level, or that is exploitable in a way that the client could exploit it.
Yeah.
Because it's programmable, and actually potentially is just unknowable to you as a programmer, because, you know, the halting problem, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like I've seen the reports that have come back, like pre-reports and things, so not the one at the end public see for other projects. And
yeah,
there wasn't that level of specificity. There was like, this is a pattern to avoid in this context. But it wasn't like, here's the solution. It was like, you Google what we've said and figure it out for yourself. But I don't know if you paid the full $250,000 or whatever, because I don't know at what stage these were when they were passed on to me as like, hey, what's your opinion on this?
Sure.
Like it might be that if you, at the earlier stage, they had said literally, oh, change this line of code, change that line of code. So the answer is I can't be certain, but I suspect that they wouldn't want to put their balls on the line for that. It would be silly to do so.
That's a tough thing to buy into. Like we've consulted, not here, but in my past lives, like I've consulted with like really specialty organizations that solve a very specific problem. And it's really tough to know. I think in all those situations, I've been disappointed every one of those? Like every one of those, some of those things are pointing out obvious, or like, yeah, it makes sense, or something similar to that. And also, you always think that like, well, is there other things that were missed, and now you create more questions related to what comes back, or you look at it and say this wasn't worth fucking anything. Um, and especially if that thing comes back clean, you have like a false sense of security associated to something. It's a tough business to be able to scale in any sort of way, right? Or
I
like it's
mean,
tough business to be experts
yeah.
in a thing and try to scale that, right? Because things
It's also so
and
intrinsically tied to hours, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of back to the problem actually, which is validating is better for this than consulting, and that you're not 100% tied to your hours. But there is a point where
that's true.
validating is very, very tied to two things: the amount of time you can spend marketing and soaping foundations, and the amount of time you can spend running nodes, right?
Hmm.
Both of which are time bound by the number of operative hours you have. And the it's back to the picking winners. It like
Yeah,
running a validator business becomes gambling
yeah,
eventually.
yeah,
Um, but the flip side of that is, you can do safer things like consulting, but then you have to with a huge amount of confidence say we are experts in X, which is actually that's the problem I've always had with consulting in general. Like your security example, like um, I've done a lot of work and a lot of literature review now on consensus systems, for example. I've had to. Um, but I would feel I would feel relatively uncomfortable saying that I am a consensus expert because, well, number one, I don't think I am. But number two, like it's like compared to who, right? Compared to somebody on the street, sure. Compared to another engineer, sure. Compared to a smart contract engineer who's never thought about consensus, like in the layer below the bit they write on,
right,
sure. Uh, you go, okay, we have a problem with we've forked near. We want to deploy it in this business context. We have this specific problem. Can we pay you for 2 days to come in and figure it out? I'll be like, no, that is a,
right,
that is a cool. Let's come in, sit around a whiteboard, have a talk, have a think about it. I'll go away, sleep on it, do some reading, think about, sketch some stuff out in a text editor,
right,
play
right.
around with
Yeah,
some Rust, come back in a couple of weeks, have another check. Do you know what I mean? That like I'm so like I can't really. I think possibly maybe it's just the way my mind works. Maybe some people just literally can walk in the room and be like, "Bam, there's your solution." But I
yeah.
don't know. I just feel like it takes so long to load a problem into my brain
Well, I
to
think
like
that's fair. Yeah.
understand the implications of the problem, right? That I
Plus all
never
those
feel like I'm an expert in it.
plus all those contracts are point in time, right? Like everything like you do the first one and then you want to come back and you do something else. So your point earlier around like having that instead of just an open-ended consulting agreement, or if it's just a fixed time fixed price thing where you're just doing a specific response to a set of contracts that you're launching with, that's one thing. But as as in this situation where they're not on the P&L, that they might be on some sort of like just commissioned retainer, if you want to call it that, whatever the hell you call this. And then as long as they're adding value, then they receive commissions. And once they stop, then or at least they're
Yeah.
getting
I mean,
delegation. And
that's
once
the
they
thing.
stop, you yank it.
What's the expectation there? It's really interesting because I mean, also just the amount of like the cost of these audits, they are very expensive.
Yeah.
It almost wouldn't surprise me if that delegation is there, almost in perpetuity until the wind changes and they decide to yank it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
But to
all
pay off, like, yeah, if it's like a $250,000 audit or something, you're going to have to be validating a Cosmos network with a healthy delegation for a very fucking long time
yeah.
to get that money back. And you're going to have mouths to feed in the meantime, right? The kind of engineers that can
Right.
do those audits. Those are the reason that costs what it does is because that's what those salaries cost, and that might be your only audit that year.
Yeah. And I mean, this chain has a pretty decent, like a decent price where it can afford that, or it can support those. This one, they're doing it with one analytics firm and four separate security firms. My only issue with that also, like, so I guess I get that. Like, I get it from I mean, it's clearly good for the foundation because, I mean, they're making the other 95% on that staked amount, number one. So things are good, right? Wallets are increasing. I understand that doesn't mean it's money in, but whatever. Their tokens continue to increase. They're taking a small slice of that and being able to pay a vendor basically off the books. Basically, is what that is, right? You have an inflated P&L, and even if you have protocol revenue coming in, like it looks better because you're taking whatever. I don't know, like this quick math, probably $2.5 million a year off the P&L, right? And you're just doing it through this commission thing. So that looks great. Like that's fucking awesome. Like it's nice to be able to not show that as being a loss. Like it's a win-win for everybody, except for node ops who who those groups are displacing. And what I found is like in some of these, they're just not like that is not their core business. And in some of these chains where it's been more challenging, they haven't done very well, like in terms of delivering infrastructure. Like we've helped those teams behind the scenes in some areas that you can tell that they're not using like remote signers and they're not there's no like there might be some security practices there, but they're not familiar with the software or the protocol. And so you're just basically delegating to somebody that's doing this as it's not the main business. It's like a side
There's
business.
just
That's the way I look at
exactly. It's just like and then ultimately they'll start going, okay, well, if we're doing this in the long run, should we just delegate it to somebody else or hire somebody that already knows how to do this? And then
which we've seen elsewhere.
yeah,
That
and
we
then there's
the
another
other group,
middleman in the middle.
yeah. Noel and I ran into a group that took a bunch of delegation from both of us actually on a chain, and we ran into them at an event in Austin. And I'm like, you guys, I'm like, and like they're really nice guys. They're actually like they hired a really strong. They have a strong team that does this, and they execute well. Like I've helped them. We've helped both of us help them behind the scenes. We were joking about that, but like I'm like that's the only reason I'm not pissed is because you could take our delegation, but at least you're signing 100%. Like at least you have your shit together. Somebody comes in like takes 100 million delegation towards from us and then like has a 77% signing ratio. Like what the hell are you doing? Like like I understand wanting to get in anyway. That's when the finance of the business outdrives what the actual execution is, right?
But then it's like so consulting before, like those businesses, they primarily are some version of like consulting. So time for maybe less so the analytics example because they're just going to put up a fancy dashboard and keep it up, right?
Yes.
But like a lot of the others are sort of time for money, right?
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because the whole point of the validator business, the reason it's potentially worth building a business around is that it scales. Like, so there's this like there's like an obsession at the moment for like calling a lot of small businesses I've noticed call themselves startups, right? And it's
Mhm.
like, no, you're a fucking coffee shop.
Yeah.
Like you don't like you're not. We've got really rapid
Startup.
growth. You're still a fucking coffee shop, or you like if your entire business was I don't know, we connect direct selling coffee growers with consumers so they can
Mhm.
sell B2C. That is a startup because you have created a new market and your
Mhm.
ability to scale that market is beyond the number of people you have in the building, right? You can scale that pretty much infinitely as long as you keep paying Jeff Bezos for more AWS servers. But you don't need more people in the building. You don't need more HR people, business support, office space, shipping, trucks, whatever. That's the definition of a startup. Your ability to scale beyond an idea of variable costs, like an outside multiplier, right?
Okay.
And and the thing about validation, right, is it's almost a startup in that if you don't run your own tin, and even if you do buy your own tin to some extent, depending on the accounting practices in the country you live in, you can potentially do a multiplier way more than your head count, your fixed costs, your variable costs, that kind of thing, right? And so yeah, maybe it does fall into startup territory. But what's interesting about this new development where people are expecting specific deliverables in return is it's pushing validation organizations, node operators, back into a position, especially independent ones, because I don't see Figment having their feet held to the fire. But I guess those guys are investing VC, right?
They are.
So
Yeah, sure.
they're actually not validators. They are off the book. They are investors who are getting an off the books
Well,
return
I
on
think
either their own money or somebody else's or combination or
yeah, but they worked that's the other way though, right? They start as a
yeah,
validator, then you build capital to be able to expand
yeah,
and build
exactly.
chains and do whatever else, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're still I'm not picking on Figment. I'm saying doesn't necessarily mean that they're still a good validator because those individuals may have moved on or it's a different
Sure.
organization, right? But it's different from
I
like,
think
hey,
like with
we
somebody like Block Demon or something, I think they're the same,
yeah,
right? And they're the ones
yeah,
that double sign twice, and you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and they're just every conference or every event you see is like sponsored by Blockdaemon. You're like, "Ugh, yeah, okay, whatever, man."
Right.
Like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but I guess back to my point though, which is that I think this disproportionately affects independent validators because we are time bound, and every additional hour we need, we have to find from our team, which is typically 1 to 3 people, from a straw poll of independent operators that we know. It's 1 to
Mhm.
3.
Yeah.
There will be a more rigorous one coming soon when I eventually get ethics sign off for a questionnaire on this very subject, where I want to find out what the average size of small independent
Mhm.
operators is. But yeah, theory 1 to 3,
Mhm.
and every additional hour has to be paid for. So you end up back in the situation where you're taking a startup style business and then you're making it back into a consultancy business
Yeah.
in order to be profitable. And that seems weird to me because consultancy is wildly profitable, right? If you that validation is a good business model, is cutting edge. But if you go back to like the problem with validation is it's kind of like if you go pick up like a really weird language, like a programming language, to do like work at a bank, and then you come out of it and you go, oh my god, nobody uses mainframes anymore. I don't need to know the COBOL programming language. I've put myself in a dead end.
Mhm.
Validation's a bit like that. You have a very specific skill set, but almost nobody will pay for it other than in a really specific context.
Yeah.
It's just not useful. It's just not a useful skill set. So you go, well, okay, is it just more profitable to, yeah, because there's no, I don't know that you can do consultancy as a validator strictly. So the two aren't as comparable. But if most validator node operators have some other technical background, right? And after a point, you do look at it and you go, that technical consultant is pretty profitable. So
It is, but I
it's
mean,
kind of a retrograde step to go back in that direction, but in this really niche industry, I feel like you may as well just go do infrastructure consultancy for a big bank and make like $3,000 a day or whatever the number is, and you know just put it on a normal, pay a cheap accountant and not worry about any of the crypto
yeah,
shenanigans, right?
maybe, but like, I mean, and I mean, I came from that world, so that world has its own fucking major issues. I mean, one of the reasons that really got involved in this was the goal of being able to earn money while you sleep, which in services you cannot. Like you're constantly catching fish to eat, constantly. And if you're not in the fucking boat, you're not eating. And so that usually means travel, or it means
Do you think
work,
that's
or it
not?
means those
Do you
types
not
of
think
things.
that's the case with validation?
I don't think so at all. No,
Do you not feel like I feel like if you're on the treadmill and you're like, I mean, I think maybe it's a bit different for us because we focused very heavily on a few chains and didn't maybe cast as wide a net as we should have done.
Mhm.
And then a baby came along, and now I'm looking at it and going, poof, we've been off the treadmill for a while. But
Yeah.
as soon as you start to like, it is daunting to find new business and pick winners.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm not saying
Uh,
that. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. Like, I'm just saying that, like, but the ability that even if that number is really low, or sometimes that number's negative, at least there's a number that's changing. And so you still have to hustle. I'm not saying you don't have to hustle, and you still have to get lucky. All those things are still that's consistent in any business that you run, right? It's
Sure, but
that's
it's very different from like if you're trying to pitch a new client, right?
yeah.
Try consulting, whatever. You say like, oh, you've got a problem, you need it solving. What's the problem? And they say, it's this, or we can't even fully describe it. And you go, great, I can help you describe that problem, or
Uh-huh.
great, I know how to solve. If they can describe the problem, you say, great, I know how to solve that problem. If they don't know how to describe the problem, you say, great, I can help you describe that problem, and
Mhm.
then we can solve it together. What's your time scale on this? And you're already in, right? It's like breathing, isn't it? You just get
Yeah.
into that switch.
Sure.
Like, and then you know that is going to like, you just have to calculate your costs of travel and blah 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 and acquisition, and then that's going to return money.
I mean, honestly, this business is very similar to that. So, like, when we get involved in things early, those same questions come up. Like, we do quote unquote free consulting work around chain setups and around delegation programs and around some basic tokenomics and around how to do incentivized test nets or not. Like, all those same conversations, any team that we talk to has those same questions. Hey, what do you guys learn about this? Like, what do people like? And I go, what are your time frames and where are you guys? And like, so there's some similarities there in terms of that. And I think that comes, I mean, that's good. That's good for me because like that's part of the expertise of like, hey, why work with us is because we have been through a bunch of those, right? There's no different than any other services organization, right? It's based on experience and like seeing it. The only reason you use consultants is not necessarily the expertise, is that they've seen so many fucked up situations that whatever your fucked up situation is, somebody goes, oh yeah, we were down the street somewhere else. We kind of did
We've
something
seen a
similar,
few
right?
of those in
Yeah,
Cosmos.
which if you work in one, if you work in one organization, you don't have that experience. Not everybody has a Prop 16, or nobody's. We've done 17 test nets in one day in early Juno days, or
Yeah.
have or dealt with like a fucking crazy set of both amazing and totally fucking awful delegation programs, or why incentivized test nets for validators don't work. Like all those situations, those teams want to hear about, right? So all that, I mean,
What's
all that
really
info comes
interesting,
across.
right, is just that. So that's uh yeah, okay, so you're right. I guess it's about audience, isn't it? And I guess like
Mhm.
on my experience has been pretty much what you've just described there. But like especially in the last sort of 9 months, 10 months, a year, I've been mainly talking to people who are in trad fi, I
Yeah.
suppose, in some
Yeah.
way, shape, or form, or they're on the boundary between bringing TradFi, like regulated TradFi, into some regulated crypto, right?
Yeah.
Or academics, right? And so the academics, like when you talk about those sorts of things, like what are the things we've been through, what works, what doesn't work. The academics just like, of course, those things that didn't work. That's easily described. It was written about in 1997 or something, and you're like, and they're like, okay, I'll email you, and they're like, yeah, I'll email you some citations, which they don't, and then you have to remember, and then you have to email them back and be like, hey, what was that thing you mentioned? And then eventually you read a paper and you're like, god damn it, they were 100% right. Of course they were. It's obvious. It's obvious somebody would have thought about this ahead of time. Anyway,
Right.
and the other people have one of two reactions. They go, oh wow, really? It's that bad?
Yeah.
Huh? Or they literally aren't aren't technical enough or don't know enough about the area to even like grasp the moral of the story that you're trying to kind of impart, which possibly might be a problem with my storytelling being somewhat more rambling than maybe the norm. But it's like, so I think maybe my kind of what's the word, my frustration with not having worked out how to sell all the stuff that we've learned in the last 3 years,
Mhm.
especially in that environment, is I think that possibly it's very hard to articulate the value of it if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas I guess, like you say, if you talk to an early stage foundation team,
Yeah.
look at us on like Aptos at the end of the day. Like that was a project where they were already rolling, they were already doing a lot of stuff. They did ask validators like at early stages a few questions about like how things should be run and other blah blah blah. Were they ultimately influenced by much of anything that we fed back on? Don't know.
Right.
But but they must have felt it was valuable enough to select the set that they did, right?
Yeah.
Even though actually a lot of those validators, or at least a lot of the independent validators, were from Cosmos, not from more other big VC backed type ventures. Although
Yeah.
the big ones were there, obviously. So
Yeah. It's yeah. Anyway, so back to the validator business, however, and going back to this, like I can see, and basically what we've described a way to build a services engagement, like a services type consultancy that does have at least perception of value. Like security is a good one, analytics is a good one. Like those are good ones that teams buy into because they might not have that expertise on site or need an outside opinion associated to one or two of those, right? Um, and then when you combine that with running nodes on the side, whether those are or when running validators on the side, where that's done well or done poorly, that's a good combination. And it does. I think it's weird how they must capture that in terms of revenue and those types of things. But I mean, I kind of see why it's going that way, and I see how that is a good thing for maybe both organizations. I think it's better for foundations than it is maybe for the vendors. I think I'd rather just have a straight ACH in those situations when there's consulting work to be done or services work to be done. Um, but it's definitely a theme. So there's more and more of it. So as Schultze said, is it time to build a shitty Explorer? Might be.
maybe it is.
Maybe, maybe it
So
is.
for long term viewers of the podcast, I've looked back through our overlays in the software we use. And when we talked about this originally, we actually talked about it in terms of the product maturity matrix, and we literally have one here, right? So so we are here in over on the right. Sorry to those listening later, but this is a crash course in product maturity consulting, I suppose. We're just giving away stuff for free here today, Usurper. But so validation, right, has moved on the evolution axis, which is the X axis, I think, to being a mature commodity product, right, which has no differentiation. So validators are having to come up with products to sell, like, so that would be like a dashboard or something, or something custom, which is like the consulting offer, which is again moving all the way further to the left, right, to differentiate their offer.
Right.
If you were to go to a foundation and say to them, look, we have a smart contract idea, we have the ability to implement it and deploy it on your chain, but it's like, we're building it for the first time, that would be a Genesis thing, right, which would be all the way over here on the left. But that would be incredibly, I mean, that's putting all your eggs in one basket as a validator. Although, again, I mean, ironically, I suppose, for us, for Needlecast as a business, like, that's kind of what we did on Juno, because we did free work to help the chain get launched.
Yeah.
And then we launched a couple of protocols on Juno, and primarily we made money. We didn't make money on the name service, albeit, restake some, and then
watch that go from
shot ourselves in the head a little bit with that one.
Stepped on your own D. Yeah, exactly.
But also got payback for that in delegations too. So, like, I've been there, or we've been there as a business as well, and it's not that sustainable. I mean, I guess like all these things, it's only as sustainable as the token price, actually, isn't it? So it would still be pretty sustainable.
Yeah.
If Juno was $40.
It's funny because it kind of bumps into the other conversation that a ton of us were having recently in the last, I don't know, it seems like it's come up in the last 5 or 6 months, which is, does a validator business actually have any sort of value? Like, is it a sellable object?
I was going to say, but didn't that come up because somebody actually had sold or was looking to sell?
Well, I know there's one that's out there that has not a term sheet, but like I don't even know if it's a sim deck. It might be just some information, and has a broker that's trying to get rid of it. So I do know that there is.
What was the ballpark on how many chains they validate?
I don't know. I can probably look though while we're on the
just pure Cosmos, or a bunch of things.
I think pure Cosmos, although I think that might have changed. They definitely started Cosmos, but I think that has changed maybe over time.
Right.
Let me see. Let me just take a look and see if I can see if there's a page related.
What is a Cosmos validator business worth? It's like the tree falling down in the forest, isn't it? If there's a tree falling down in the forest and the token price is 1 cent, does anybody give a shit?
This one, they are on actually a decent amount of freaking chains, like maybe 20 Cosmos chains. And important ones, Injective, Celestia, they're on the Hub, Dimension, Osmosis, DYDX, Akash, Quasar, Stargaze, Evmos, and OmniFlix and down. So and then I do have it. I did hear they have 30. This says they have 30 something million staked, which in Cosmos is a pretty decent number actually. So
say 30 million staked. That's
30 networks around. Yeah. So anyway, but so I know that I know what they're shopping and things like that. But the interesting piece, like I just don't know. Like if they have contracts and other types of things that are like repeatable, and like you have agreements with organizations, maybe you're providing some services for that, I can see, like it's something, hey, we run this pretty large XYZ for somebody, and it's a $100,000 a year revenue type of thing, and they're not going anywhere. So therefore we think it's worth, some sort of, here's what the costs are. We think it's a multiplier on that income. That makes sense to me. But like the actual val, I just don't know. Like if you sold Needlecast,
for me, it would be worth 0 because the delegation can just disappear, right?
If you sold it to me,
14 days on staking.
Well, if you sold it to me, right? Either number one, I don't do anything, you hand over the keys, and then I'm running a civil, right? Because then I'm doing governance on both. So I just keep it needlecast. I'm running it. I have all the keys. I can do anything I want with that Val, right? It's mine. It's my wallet. Everything else.
How
You
do
just sell
listeners know this has not already occurred?
it because I would never pay it. So
Yeah, you're
that's
too
how,
smart
that's
to
how,
buy it.
yeah. So
Wait,
so
even the app says validator? No.
so then I'm running a civil, right? And then eventually that comes out. Like it's obvious, right? Somehow that
Yeah, sure.
happens, I would think that, and then you risk losing both then it turns into a fucking Twitter storm, and you're losing both the delegation on
Okay, sure, but
that one
let's
as well
assume
as your other one,
let's assume for a second that your operational security is good enough that
where
it
you can
doesn't
run
come
it.
out.
Yeah,
That it
maybe.
doesn't come out. Yeah,
Then
yeah.
you're running two brands.
Then you're running two brands, but it still has no value, right? Because the
Just
the
commission.
delegation is only ever 14 days away from not being there, or in fact, if they use the restake functionality less,
Yeah.
or if it's whatever, there's a bunch of ways like to be facetiously bring that number down.
Yeah.
And then it's just a brand and some tin, which probably they don't even own their own tin, right? So I just don't know that a validator business has any value.
I just don't
Really.
know. Yeah, it's a really interesting
A-
question. Like,
An
it's
institutional, so I have the theory that an institutional, like specifically an institutional validator service that only white labels for TradFi businesses, that would have a hypothetical value if you sold it because it will have business agreements in place, right? But I've talked to TradFi, I know there are TradFi businesses who operate in the space and they stake with Figment or Blockdaemon or whoever, right? I get that happens, right? But I have talked to some people who are in the space who are moving into the space, and there are like one or two organizations per country that they are the guys that do that.
Yeah.
And those spots are already filled. That is a hard market to break into. It is a hard and expensive market to break into, and it ain't. It comes from having some backing, knowing the right people, and having a nice office in the right part of the right city.
Sure.
It's like the I couldn't be specific about the numbers, but I've talked to some people and found out some information about like some of the ETH validators, for example, in that kind of world, and they're really concentrated, like who's using who, and because of regulatory reasons, it seems to be that people prefer to use an operator in their own country, which totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Good news for you because America is big, I hear. But it's almost more of a cybersecurity business than it is a node operations business. It's three things, right? It's having somebody as good as Artifacts lot to just like go out and do sales, and it's and after that point, it's cybersecurity because it's all confidence. The node operations part is just the sausage. Like nobody cares about how the sausage is made. Sorry,
Agreed.
the node operations is whatever is the sausage grinder. Sorry, in the analogy, which got derailed.
Yeah.
I
think that's right. I guess it depends on the audience, but I think that's right. Yeah. I don't know. And back to the sale piece, like and then if you do buy that brand and you want to be able to ingest it, how would you possibly ingest it? Like you're asking people to redelegate to another Val, or you can't rebrand it. It's just a weird situation to try to eject from. You know what I mean? Or if it's somebody who does not have a brand in a specific ecosystem, I can kind of see that where you just like rebrand it and people kind of figure it out, like, who the fuck is this?
We'll just change the moniker.
The moniker.
But how come
yeah.
I'm delegated to King nodes now?
Who the fuck is this? And I also think foundation delegations instantly disappear because like like those situations, unless it's like something very specific in the contractual type of thing where something's happening associated to some services that are being delivered, but for the most part, those are typically
well, sure, that's what I mean. I think in that situation, I think it has to be an acqui-hire, right? Because you basically need to pay a lump sum and then get the people who work there previously to continue to answer email on the old company email to the foundations and say, what's the bit in Star Wars when there's shooting and then they call the the security desk, and then Han Solo answers, and he's like,
Uh,
"It's all fine here.
everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Situation normal." And they're like, "We heard shooting." He's like,
No.
"All fine. Situation totally normal." That would be like if a business got sold, then the foundation like tries to get in touch. You're just like, "All fine.
It's all fine.
Situation."
He's just in the bathroom. We'll try. We'll call you back. Thank you.
Yeah. It's totally cool. We'll be yeah. It's like so and so has been disconnected from Slack, and it's like, "All fine. All fine. Just phone must have run out of battery."
Oh my god. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, which I guess in the end that's probably healthy. I do think that unlike other organizations, um, like and maybe there always be a Figment and Blockdavid, maybe those things just continue on, right? But maybe for other organizations, it's good that there is a birth, maturity, and death associated to some brands where there's
Just a
constant.
circle of life, as you
It's a
said.
cycle. It's a cycle of degen life where some brands eventually disappear and the value that they provided are no longer needed, and it moves on. You know what I mean? So like we've been starting
Yeah.
getting some chains that like Ethereum, like even our Ethereum nodes, I think is anybody can run Ethereum nodes. I think, and especially like with
More or
DVT
less.
technology, even with what Lido's doing with SSV and OBOL and things like that. The whole point is to be able to push it down and create a lower risk situation where you have a 3 of 5 or a 5 of 7 that's signing. So you reduce that redundancy and that need for professional node ops, and people can run it. I mean, what the hell? I could run Ethereum node out of my house right now. It'd be great, right? Like, and there'd be no issue with it. I'm sure I could run it at a level that would be fine for those types of situations. And I think that goal of trying to reduce that need is great. I mean, it makes sense. My only problem is that that's right now where I basically make the most of my living.
Yeah.
So working, and also like there's other types of things like snapshots on chains. Like I think that should, like, a goal would be to never take a snapshot. Like there should be realistic ways to be able to catch up very quickly, from a node perspective that doesn't require moving 700 terabytes of fucking data around. Like those are all things that I think are good goals that will eventually go away, and good goals are of issues that creates opportunities for teams that will go away, and that will be replaced by another need that comes forward. But it's just I don't know. We'll see. I don't need
Yeah.
it doesn't need to last for me for 30 years. I just want to just want to keep plugging away at it where we're able to offer value in a way that makes sense, right? For the time that for the teams and the ones that we're working with.
Yeah, I guess I mean I suppose from our point of view, like we're obviously like committed to running the chains that we're committed to run. Ironically, like we were obviously winding down on Mars, and then Mars were like, "Well, we're going to wind down on you." So they broke up with us before we could break up with them.
Oh, maybe because you're talking shit on Game of Nodes for
Shit.
for 8 episodes.
Have a have a blockchain that does something, then, lads. Would be my advice on that. Yeah, we've never made we've run that validator at a loss for 2 years, so or whatever the length of time that chain has existed.
Yeah, my misery. Yeah.
What are you going to do? Like I mean, at the end of the day, like none of the servers are they're not cheap either. But like you go, is the cost of that server going to put us out of business? No. Do we want to be paying the cost of that server? No, absolutely not. Every single $100, every single $200, whatever it might be, is burning away from our runway. And
Yep.
the business that we have in its current form is not going to exist in 2 years, I would guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, you make that case for any business, though, right?
Well, sure, but I think the
Unless for
space moves so quickly. I think commodity validation,
for
which is
sure.
primarily what we do, will go away. And I think a lot of the foundation delegations we've got have, like you say, been either have been mainly contingent on giving advice in early stages, right?
Which is a valuable thing.
Which
There's
is a
nothing wrong with
valuable
it.
thing.
Yeah.
but after a point, right? Foundations, chains, networks, whoever it is that's the counterparty in that goes, well, look, we're well past Genesis now. There's no the additional value is not here, which is understandable. Like, I understand it. But it's not, it's not an income source you can rely on. So it kind of comes back to like, is it recurring income for us as a business to then use that income as the basis to expand?
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely not. Like, the conclusion, if you make $100 from validation today, it's not a given that you should invest $50 of that in trying to make $200 from validation next month, because the fact that you even make $100 today might have, like, it's not something that's accountable, that works in the way that normal business accounting does, like for all of our other contracts and stuff, where you just go, oh, okay, well, this month we've been paid this, next month they want more deliverables, so
Right.
whatever. And then that project's probably going to come to an end in 4 months time, so in 2 months time we need to start thinking about what will be the next project we want to onboard, and go and talk to people and then get something lined up and blah blah blah. It just doesn't really work in that way, which, yeah, whatever, different markets are different, right? Like, it's not a complaint, it's just an observation, really.
And credit says, because we're all going to make it and be rich, right? Right. Exactly.
That's
That is
100%
correct.
right.
That's not, I mean, that's 100%. We know that. And I was, hopefully,
But, like,
hopefully that didn't, hopefully, hopefully didn't say anything against that, because that's 100% going to happen.
yeah, I mean, like, something really, really tragic happened the other day, which was, I was in our shared office. I was just chilling, making a cup of coffee, and somebody who works there for one of the other companies was just like, hey, did did I remember it right? The name, you worked for a blockchain called Juno, and I was like, yeah, some time ago, yeah, worked for a blockchain called Juno. And they're like, yo, man, like, they were like, oh, they held some crypto and stuff, and we just got chatting. They're like, how is that going? How is that going? Like, how's that token? And I was like, I don't know. I think, like, it's obviously, like, nothing on its all-time high, but I think it's probably doing all right now. And they got the chart up on their phone, and it's been doing worse. And they just turned it around to me. I was like, oh
Keep
man,
zooming in.
that's,
Just look at the last
yeah.
one.
I was like, oh shit, that's actually doing way worse than I thought it was. And they were like, oh right, okay. And then I was just like, I just stood there. They said, like, they were sort of like just talking to me, and I was just like stood there doing the mental maths, and it was like, yep,
Yep.
it's in the
Couldn't have
ballpark of,
held that.
it's in the ballpark of literally could write it down as a complete inventory loss at this point, because of its margin on the original acquisition value.
Whoops. Should have
Yeah,
sold it.
you're like big oops. They're like, sorry, like in one of those, like, war films where it shows them in later life, and somebody says something to them, and they just get that, like, ringing in the ears and just zone out.
Yeah.
And then
Get
gradually
that.
the ringing stops.
Ooh.
Yeah, then the ringing stops, and then there's just, like, it's like their mother being like, "Would you like more pancakes, Timmy?" And they're just like, "Oh, sorry, Ma. Yeah, I'll have 2 pancakes, please." What were you thinking about, Timmy?" Nothing, Ma. I was just thinking about something that happened in the war." It's like that. They're like, "Hey, man, are you gonna finish making that coffee? Because I want to make one after you." And you're just like ears ringing, staring into the distance.
Matt Damon's in the corner grabbing his knees, crying. You're like, what the heck?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, so right, but back to the thing of, like, it's dangerous to get in bed with a foundation or whatever, and devote too much time to any one project. Like, there's your reason. Like, is that these things can be very profitable. They can work very well, and they can also become a massive time sink and actually not return
Oh yeah, for sure.
a proportionate return, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so maybe you're just better off, with Artifact's approach. Kiss 1,000 frogs, find 1,000 blockchains.
We were yeah, actually, but I honestly, I don't know if that's the case either. Like, I mean, I think running notes for every single thing. I know there's a lot that do that. I think that's just exhausting and not the right way of
You
doing
don't
it.
want to be Polkachoo running 18,000 nodes?
I don't. I have no interest in that. I have no interest in that. And maybe that's a strategy. I don't know. I just don't. I just
I
like
think I
the
have a strategy, by the way. I was thinking about this. The answer is you only pick winners.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I
That
just haven't been able to
oh
execute on
shit.
it somehow.
Shit, we told that people that on live on air, huh?
We're just giving out $1 million advice here today. How to start service business, how to pick winners. Okay, we didn't tell you how to pick winners, but we just told you can't lose if you always pick winners. It's going on
Yeah.
the Game of Nodes merch. You can't lose if you always pick winners.
I just I don't know. I got to meet the team. I got to feel comfortable with the people you work with, right? And you have to look them in the eye and like no different than anything else, right? It's like do I you got to view it I view it as a partnership because I'm investing. I view it as an investment because what I'm really doing is I'm investing time and in true dollars into those types of things, right? And then like similar to other chains that we run, if we start
I like
something
the way that
now,
you say it. You make the really clear distinction. We are investing true dollars, not shitcoins. We are
not
investing true
shitcoins, like
dollars.
fucking dollars that we pay. Yeah. Like if I could find a way where all of our hardware vendor if I built a shitcoin and all of our hardware vendors ran validators on it and I could mint tokens and just pay them in commission, that'd be fucking awesome. Can I do that? Would
I mean, you can. Whether or not they
just gotta
accept payment
convince them all, hey,
is.
run your own node on my shitcoin thing, and then I'm just gonna stake a fuckload of make believe on you,
I
and
mean,
then you
as
can
soon as
just
you
sell that
point out that
5%.
it is all a confidence trick,
Yeah,
it's
that's
much
it.
more obvious that it is just a confidence trick.
Waterfalls of fucking why didn't I think about that earlier? But anyway, so but if, like if we start something now, like in whatever June of 2024, like I'm not expecting anything from it until 2026, 2027. Like it takes years unless there's and even like at mainnet launches, like um I get really fucking weird about like dumping on day one mainnet launches. Like I just don't like doing that. Which is probably a probably a mistake, but
That's dumb.
because there's always like a 2-day pump, right? Like after the thing launches the next 2 days. But I
Yeah,
stay away from that shit.
the only reason we ever made any money on Stargaze was because we swallowed. We held our nose and did that.
I should have. When I first started, I'm such a fucking moron. Like when I first started with like back in the osmosis and stargaze type stuff, like I was so like worried about like position in the set, which does really matter.
It does matter a lot, and
It
especially
does
early
matter.
days of Cosmos. It mattered a lot
It
more
mattered
with
a
the
lot, right?
explorers that existed at the time in the format that they existed at the time.
So like dumping shit always I was like, oh, I'm just gonna put it back and put it back, right? And so we would always try to get our personal validator bond higher, and we would always stake that and restake it, and we would we wouldn't do it like on a script or anything, although I have done that before, but not like traditionally. But we were always like I was always concerned about it, so I wanted to put it back in. And now I look back on that and like, what the fuck was I doing? Like we work for 2 years on something, and so and once it goes go live, like maybe after a certain period of time, doesn't have to be all of it, but there should be a return, like because it's not a return because we're dumping, it's a
Well,
return
so
because we paid 2 years of costs associated to something,
every network has the double hump shape, right?
Yeah.
So it's very few that come back up. So you have to make that money, and at this point, like I think for us on Stargaze, we obviously made some money there for the first moment, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we're probably in a loss on that chain now.
Oh, I would.
Don't
Yeah.
doubt it.
Yeah, but also I mean, I also think that's like I haven't pulled commissions on Stargaze in probably not even kidding, probably 15 months. I probably haven't touched that validator in 15 months. Like I should be restaking that if I'm doing anything, but it isn't done anything. But I don't even care because I also think that like Stargaze have a much longer viewpoint on. Like I think it's so incredibly undervalued. Like I look at that token price, I was like, what the hell's going on with this shit? It is
4 billion total issuance. That's what's going on. That's
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I think
that's a problem.
Yeah, I think that tokenomics is.
Isn't it? Are we done with that soon? Was it 7 years? Or was it 7 years or something? I forget what. It was a pretty high.
I think it's something like 7 years, but
yeah.
you basically look at whatever your validator's making, right? And you go, okay, I think ours is probably at 1.5 mil Stargaze or something like that.
Yeah.
So
You mean
it's
staked?
ballpark. Yeah, something like that. I
You
think we've
it
got
you mean do you
four.
mean your own, or do you mean, like, total?
I think four total. I think 1.5 or so. Like we've
Is
compounded a
yours?
bit. Yeah, something like
I don't
that.
think I have
It's
nearly that much. We have
probably worth
19
like 15
staked.
grand or something.
We have 19 staked, and I have only oh, actually, there's not much on here. There's only, like, a couple 100,000, 400,000. Where the hell did it all go? Where'd it go, lads?
Where did it go?
Yeah, $6,200 on it.
But like with the kind of issuance that it's going to get, I think like it's just going to drop further. Like, I think Stargaze is going to lose its money until we eventually turn that validator off. Is my prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
I believe in
I
the
agree.
project, but like I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think the problem is that Cosmos doesn't have the juice. It's two things, right? I think number one, Cosmos doesn't have the juice. Number two, I think the market cycles have not worked out in the
Yeah.
favor
Yeah.
of the projects. And number three, I think by the time it did have the juice, like something else will come along. And the other problem with that is that a year is an infinity in crypto, and by the time you get to point 3, right, we're already 2 years after mainnet launch. It's going to be 3, maybe 4 at
Mhm.
that point. And you know, we're already we passed 10,000 chains ages ago. Cosmos is 82 plus or something in production.
what?
Production
Oh, 8
chains.
oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just like differentiating yourself in that environment. Like it's just a saturation of the supply is high, demand is low, right? That's
Yeah.
the bottom line, right? And if your token's got 4 billion issuance or whatever the number is, I'll have to double check the tokenomics. Nah, we're never going to make any money on that. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Did you see that whole Twitter hashtag around consolidate the chains today?
No, what was that?
I forget who started it. I saw, Golden Ratio retweeted there. He said it as well. I forget who actually started. Maybe somebody knows. And then I thought Ethan,
Bookman
actually
or
Bookman also said that as well. It was like hashtag consolidate the chains, I thought it was. But I think the idea was like, hey, there's already too many there's already too many Cosmos chains, so let's pull it back.
I mean,
Cosmos
you're not wrong.
Cosmos ecosystem needs to consolidate chains. Cosmos needs to consolidate chains. Interchain needs to consolidate the chains. Consolidate. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's yeah.
but what a it you can be
You give me
be
good help.
right, but still be saying something very dumb in public is what I've learned from my life.
Yep.
Would be my review on that. So Uncredited was saying, I think in relation to what you were talking about, you know, you're doing a project now, 2024, you're not expecting to see a return on 2026 until
Yeah.
2026, you said,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they said, so do you think outside of expected cycles, or does that not come into play?
Outside of expected no, it does not come into play. How do you predict that shit? If I could predict that, I wouldn't be in this fucking business, right? I would just be
You'd be on a beach somewhere, right?
I'd be earning 20%.
Which,
Yeah, no,
okay,
if
I'm
I
sure we must have talked about this in Game of Notes before, but you know when he says that line, like I love the line so much I just let it fly over
yeah,
my head.
yeah.
But like, if you could earn 20%,
Why
you
would
don't
you
need to rob the Nakatomi Tower. You just
totally agree.
convince a bunch of investors to give you money and say, "I'm going to take 5% of the 20." By the way,
I know,
and they
like,
go, "Yeah, great. If you can earn 20%, yeah." And then he just starts the most successful hedge fund in history.
yeah, are they investing in Cosmos
Bitcoin.
Hub? Bitcoin? Is it Bitcoin?
Wait,
Shit.
is Hans Group
That's
with
Hans?
Satoshi?
Is that wait, is it maybe it's an anagram?
Wouldn't it be great if it was? And then we just like, yeah, we were just amateur sleuths on
Like, oh my fucking god.
we fucking got I got it. Do you know what that was a funny you know, I said that I read the other week that there was a report on like the legal cases brought around crypto in the UK, and you know some of the outcomes and what it means for jurisdiction and citing of assets and blah blah blah. There was a like really minor funny point about like legal context
Mhm.
where it was some crazy proportion of the cases that had come up in Britain that had then entered into British case law. I want to say it was like 10% of the cases brought involved God, what's the name of that guy who says he is Satoshi and keeps suing people?
Oh yeah.
Craig Wright? Is it Craig Wright? Is that his name? I think it's Craig Wright because he has a name like Ian Wright, the footballer. So I think it's Craig Wright is his name. But it was like, yeah, it was like something like 10% of all cases related to crypto in any way, which is this one guy suing people. And I was like, that really is quite a sad figure, like both in terms of like how little is coming up, but also that guy.
I love it.
What?
I love it.
Oh dear.
Oh,
Do you want to talk about some news? Because there's some funny news this week.
yeah. What do we got?
Well, first of all, all Bitcoins to come with a Made in America stamp, right?
Yeah. So it's an election year in the United States, which usually means that everything is fucked. DT saying that he wants all remaining Bitcoin to be made, quote, made in USA. The quote exactly is Bitcoin mining may be our last line of defense against a CBDC. Biden's hatred of Bitcoin only helps China, Russian, and the radical communist left. We want all remaining Bitcoin to be made in the USA with 3 exclamation points. It will help us be energy dominant. Okay.
What?
I think energy dominant means like using the most, I guess. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Burning the most shit.
It will help us to pointlessly drive the world closer to climate collapse.
I think I love it. Just using the most. Using the most. Most gold is best. So yeah. So anyway,
Yes.
so he wants to Trump's post likely indicates he'd like to see more Bitcoin mining be done. U.S. companies using local resources. Current mining hotspots are in China, Central Asian countries, El Salvador, some European countries such as Germany. Data shows. Early Tuesday, Trump, the first U.S. presidential candidate to accept crypto donations. I'm actually surprised about that. I actually thought that was not the case. I thought somebody was able to take Bitcoin and USDC and ETH.
Yeah, I was gonna say
4 years ago.
Like the guy. Well, but didn't God, in the Democratic primaries, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. One of those no names.
You like Californian guy,
Somebody.
Slick
Yeah.
Sue.
Yeah, maybe because it's not presidential. Maybe that's what it was. Is presidential candidate to accept crypto.
I mean, yeah, I mean, giving Bitcoin to Trump is a really weird flex because you're like, okay, let's give my libertarian money, internet money, to an authoritarian who might then curtail my civil rights.
Yeah, I mean this is just purely if I mean this is playing to the audience.
Yeah.
He doesn't give a fuck about this. Right? So
Well, also, it's just like that Bitcoin is going straight into his private wallet, right? Probably secured by the password's probably like Stormy Daniels with a capital with a $S at the beginning and end.
Yeah, well, if there's any
each one of the dollar signs represents hush money. Can you say that now? He got convicted of that, didn't he? Yeah, cool.
Any pack associated to they're watching these wallet values. So early Tuesday, Trump U.S. To accept crypto, I said, met with executives of NASDAQ, listed Bitcoin mining firm CleanSpark and Riot platforms. I don't know those. And the former president reportedly told the attendees at an event that miners help stabilize the grid's energy supply. I think there was a comment in here about running those. Actually, I don't even say what it was, but I thought it was something about running those in specific hours of the day or trying to flatten energy use or something else like that. Like whatever, who knows? Energy use goes down at night. We're gonna turn these fucking things on so we don't need to ramp up and ramp down specific types of energy sources. We use a flat energy amount and we fill the gap by creating useless Bitcoin here because we only have a couple more years to be able to do that, and that's a good use for electricity.
I was going to say, like, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but here in the UK, they're like, oh, and remember, if you run your washing machine at night, it's slightly cheaper.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, which it is here. Well,
Like, no,
not
buy
by us.
Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. You
Now,
must
now,
buy
now you
Bitcoin.
can't. Yeah, you can't charge cars at night. None of that
Can't
shit. They
you can't do
fucking
any of the
they're
useful
going.
things at night
They're,
because
they're
some
going.
fucking dipshit is
They're
gonna be
going to one
mining.
fucking dipshit in a 12 by 10 shed with 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 a 4-inch power line going to the fucking
Also,
thing.
like
Fans in the window.
it's really interesting that they obviously he's like freaking out about CBDC. It's like I can tell you, like obviously the people that actually implement the CBDC are gonna fuck it up. Like that's kind of a given, right? But there are a lot of people a lot more smart than Donald Trump on literally every jurisdiction who are thinking very hard about this, and there is a lot of good academic research and a lot of clever people working on this.
Yeah.
Like everything in life is always a compromise between what's good and what's possible, right? And it's going to be shit as a result because it's the compromise from something to good that's something that's possible always
Right.
results in something that's a bit shit.
Where everybody's disappointed.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
there will be a lot of gray in this. And like nobody's gonna like get rid of cash. Like that's not like it, you just like I don't know, like it's very there's a conspiracy website, a kind of conspiracy website for this stuff in the UK where it's like it's like the Institute for Cash or something. I can't remember what it is now, like the Campaign for Cash or something.
Yeah.
It's like a lobby group where when you find a lobby group and they basically believe all of the things you do, but the way they talk about it and the friends they make, you're like, we can never we are not the same, you and I, even though we kind of believe the
Like
same
we're
thing.
kind of saying the same thing, but we're not saying the same thing. Yeah.
Is really funny. Like I got handed like some literature while I was buying a falafel near to where my PhD is, right? And so I literally said to my supervisor, I was like, "Yo, have you seen this?" And I was like, "It's really sad because like a lot of the things they say," and he literally finished my sentence. He was like, "Yes, in some ways their aims are similar, but their methods and tone,
Not quite the same.
they're not people you want to be seen standing next to." And I was like, "Exactly." It's like that.
Bingo.
That's pretty much there in one. He's like, still, a lot of the people who sign up to that to that decide to give discounts for using cash, which is great if you use cash. And I was like, oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
my lunch was cheaper.
As
So
long
apparently,
as they figure out a way to increase fees, make sure they can track every transaction and KYC everybody.
yeah, I mean that's the
Then
big
from
problem I
there,
think with the
it's gonna go.
CBDCs, right? Is that a lot of the
Yeah.
technology partners are the existing banks or Visa and Mastercard, right? At which point
Yeah.
it's not going to change anything. Whereas like
Right.
most of the academics in computer scientists I've talked to who work anywhere near this go like the original there were some of the original designs for packet transfer in the internet were, oh well, you pre-measure essentially all the jumps you need to take and then you charge for them, and that's how telecommunications is going to work. It's just going to be a massive escrow system and people have to pay for all of the packets. And then other people were like, well, actually, I mean, what if we just lay the cable, put in the switches, and then connect everything up, and then people pay each other, but we transfer each other's packets? Because the marginal cost is zero.
Yeah.
And then that's what happened. And that's why stuff actually works. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's what payments should be like. It should just be marginal cost should be. And as soon as you go, like, okay, the marginal cost of a payment should be zero. And in addition, I would love to have some privacy, but first of all, let's just go with marginal cost of a payment should be zero. You're like, oh yeah, it's literally completely economically opposed to the entire principle of cryptocurrencies as they are right now. Like, it literally can't work. Like zero fee payments. There's just so many problems with that, and proof of stake and DDoS and blah blah blah. And yeah, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, should we go to the next news item?
Yeah. The next one is let me read it in Rama's verbiage. TimeWave. I didn't really know TimeWave Labs before this actual piece of news here. But TimeWave Labs secures the first DAO to DAO multi-sig less. I don't think that's a word. proof of liquidity deal with Stars and Neutron, allocating 400,000 in liquidity to Astroport, controlled via ICAs and each chain's governance. That was a fucking mouthful. The actual story here is what TimeWave. I'll put a link to the tweet, and actually, I was talking to somebody we know at Astroport about this as well. So the first two blockchains to lend liquidity to each other without ever needing a multi-sig to mediate. There's now $400,000 more liquidity for the Neutron Stars pair on Astroport. So Stargaze and Neutron contribute equal amounts of USD in terms of native tokens, which was 287,000 Neutron and 10.9 million stars. There's our stars valuation. The resulting LP tokens are now owned and controlled by the Stargaze and Neutron communities. Communities, should either community wish to withdraw their assets, they may do so at any time by passing a governance proposal ordering the withdrawal. And upon withdrawal, the resulting stars will go to Stargaze and the resulting Neutron will go to Neutron. Covenants have been used in the past to migrate protocol to protocol deal off of multisig into a trustless solution. Going forward, protocols do not need multisigs as an interim step. They can go straight to using covenants as for shared liquidity deals, which is pretty cool. I guess Neutron is just holding the liquidity associated to those. They're not really involved in that actual contract, right? But they're just holding those.
So what's the mechanism here? That it all goes to a smart contract to Neutron, then ICAs it?
Yeah, so I asked my contact at Astroport. We did a bunch of those. I'm like, can you ELI5 this? Like, because I'm a fucking moron, right? And he said, so TimeWave has contracts that allows for two protocols to make proof of liquidity deals. Stargaze provides stars, Neutron provides Neutron. This is why it's trustless. The contract is set up with some variables, and that is about it. Like, what does Astroport have to do with these? Like, they provide the liquidity on Astroport, so we just get that TVL. But they did nothing. So it's just basically they have the PCL pool for them is really all that's happening within there. So I guess it's the contract importance, or the I guess it's the structure of the contract that's new here associated to that, and kind of getting away of having a multi-sig that's associated to that.
Okay, yeah. So it's a different abstraction. It's the same thing, but it's different. It's just hooked into being able to accept presumably a gov proposal result.
Yeah.
So it's a contract with a callback for a gov proposal result.
I guess so, and only with obviously, I guess with between DAOs, right? So I'll put a link.
But how do you know it's a DAO? Like, it would just be an address.
Yeah, you're right. Fair enough. Between two addresses, right? I guess it's up to the chains to be able to define how that wants to be able to happen.
Yeah, it's just that must be what they said, where it's just basically configure a couple of variables. Presumably the variables are DAO 1, DAO 2.
Right.
Or something similar to that.
Yeah, so this is Max Einhorn, Udit Vera, and Sam Hart. ICF. Let's see. So Max led design interchain allocator and was in consulting. And then Udit was Cosmos Hubs, Replicate Security Testnets, co-founder at Haifa. And Sam was and led Cosmos Stack product at the ICF, and a bunch of other folks as well. I haven't heard of TimeWave before. That's pretty cool. So first product is Covenant System Rebalancer. Covenants enable two DAOs to align their incentives by swapping tokens and providing liquidity for each other. The Rebalancer is a portfolio management solution specifically designed for DAOs that enables them to set a desired portfolio composition and maintain portfolio over time. So
I think the only use case I actually think might arguably there might be for non-private tokens on blockchains is actually DAOs, but even then, you're kind of like should only really be visible to people who are members of the DAO. I think
they're looking for a senior Rust engineer. Super.
I'll be blood. They can't.
I said that to somebody else today. It doesn't matter.
While we're on the subject of things that do not scale, my time bashing my head against some little bug in a Rust text editor when there's loads of other things to be doing. Nah. But that's the problem with smart contracts, isn't it? Is that you can get somebody else to pay you to write smart contracts, and you're like, cool, you can make some good money, but it's not like you don't get a piece of the pie, right? You get table scraps.
Yeah, you're
Or
you're
you can launch your own projects, but then you either go straight to the beach, pass go, get $200, go directly to the beach, or you go directly to your new shift manager at McDonald's job when you're
I
a
mean,
project.
no different than any other career, right?
Well, yeah, this is just it. I've been made
You're,
redundant before.
you,
You could go from being a legend to a zero,
yeah,
just like that.
you could work at a bank or you could be a bank, but it takes a lot of fucking luck to be a bank.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of DAOs, DAO continues
Speaking of
its growth
DAOs.
and adoption, with OmniFlix being the latest chain to adopt the platform after a governance proposal passed to secure funding for Flix specific features and to fund the infra for the deployment. I would have taken the infra for the deployment. What the hell? That's cool. I wonder if that is because DAO went open source, but they also still run it as a service, right? I think. Is that what they were doing?
Yeah, I think it's basically you get support from the developers.
Right. If you quote unquote subscribe, but otherwise it's just out there.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know who well, because Zeke's long gone. Presumably there are other developers on DAO as well on the back end, I guess.
Yeah, it used to yeah, there's a few, right?
There were a few in the tail end of the bull, but
You would know more than me.
yeah, probably. I should probably go jump in the Discord at some point and say, hey. Been a while. Does Flix for some reason I didn't realize Flix had Cosmosm. I thought it didn't.
I think it does. Yeah, I thought it does.
Oh, it does.
I think so.
Oh, okay,
I
cool.
believe so. Yeah.
Because I thought they were going to use the NFT module which I don't know, did that ever even happen, or was that one of those other hub meme, Cosmos Hub meme functions features that never?
Fuck, I don't remember.
Yeah,
That was a long time ago we talked about that, right? That was like when those guys were on Game of Nodes, right? That was probably like 2 years ago.
yeah, it's another example of a feature that took forever to implement in Go. So I'm not sure whether anybody ever did, or people just implemented Cosmosm and just went, oh fuck it, NFTs in Cosmosm, fuck it.
Fuck it.
Well, if somebody implements it 8 times as quickly, you're just like, they've already done the work. Let's just copy paste it, lads. It's the Cosmos way.
Uh,
A neat
yeah.
answer to anybody who is like the few closed source repos that we still have. People are like, oh, open sourced it. It's like, yeah, what we've open sourced is open sourced, and what we haven't open sourced is not open sourced, and
That's pretty cool. I'm glad that this is expanding.
yeah, it's
I
good.
think it's a great tool set. Like I hope it expands outside the Cosmos too.
I mean, you see with DAO tooling and other ecosystems that it's pretty shit, and you're like,
Catching up though. Starting to see some cooler things. Like
oh, yeah?
I mean this was I do think that how long this feels like Dado has been out for a couple of years now, right?
It has been out for a couple of years.
And it's taken a while to like I'm worried about little first mover
It's
situation.
2024, man. Like DAO has existed for 2.5 years now.
Right. So there's a little first mover in here where like they forged it and nobody else was building this, but they didn't really expand well enough. They didn't really take foothold in enough chains, and it's kind of limited within Cosmos. And then now everybody looks at this and goes, "Oh, this is a good fucking idea. Let's go build this on other ecosystems." And next thing you know, it's not gone, but it's
it would just be an
struggling, right?
Ethereum. It would just be an Ethereum L2, and all the Ethereum boomers can just clap themselves on the back that Ethereum is the only place that anything happens.
That's right. Maybe not first, but it eventually happens there. Yeah.
Yep. And it's like,
Fucking hell.
that argument sucks.
Argument fucking blows.
Your argument fucking blows, my guy. But that is, I know I've complained about it before, but that is the number one thing that you really have to suffer through if you go to meetups in the UK is they're so Ethereum focused that you are just like, give me strength. After about 10 minutes, you're like, give me strength. Like, anyway, Do you even understand the Mars piece?
I
It's
don't give a shit.
do we even understand it?
I
Yes,
don't
I
understand it.
understand
It's
it.
such a fucking circle steak. Like
I
I don't even know. I don't know. Whatever. 2 million Osmo. I don't give a shit. Some